Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Whatever your time zone, welcome. This is AI Talk, and I am your host, Kevin Crane. Welcome to the show. Today, we will be discussing the topic of keeping private data private, safe, and smart AI deployment. The integration of artificial intelligence into business operations offers great opportunities, but it also introduces significant challenges in safeguarding sensitive data. Notably, in 2024, data breaches reached an all-time high, with the average cost to impacted companies soaring to over $4.8 million per breach, a 10% increase from the previous year. But perhaps more surprisingly, nearly one-third of these breaches involved shadow data, unmonitored or forgotten data assets, and this highlights the complexities of tracking and securing information in AI-driven environments. So today in this webinar, we will delve into three important topics. We'll talk about navigating evolving AI regulations with confidence, looking to understand and adapt to rapidly changing legal the landscape surrounding AI. We'll also look at how we can identify and mitigate unseen shadow AI risks, recognizing hidden vulnerabilities and implementing strategies to address them. And finally, we'll look at also open source AI strategy development, strategies that integrate seamlessly and evolve alongside your business needs. Look, we're going to dive in first, but first I want to say thank you to everyone attending today, and that includes the folks that are joining us today on LinkedIn. Hello, everyone. And hello, everyone joining us today on Zoom. Thank you too. During today's discussion, we'd like to hear from you too, so I'd like to encourage everyone attending today to participate. So join in with your comments in the chat section, and if you have a question along the way, just jump on in. I will attempt to get some of your questions and comments into the flow of the show today, and we may have a few minutes also at the end for your questions. All right, let's jump in with a great panel of guests today, starting with Abhinav Puri, Vice President and General Manager of Portfolio Solutions and Services at SUSE. Abhinav, are you with us?
Yes, absolutely. Hi, everyone. Great to be here, and thank you for hosting us, Kevin.
Hello, Abhinav. Where are you calling in from today?
I'm calling in from Germany.
Germany, welcome aboard. Thank you so much for being with us. Also joining us today is Tori Miller-Liu. Tori is the President and CEO of the Association for Intelligent Information Management. Tori, are you with us?
I am. Hi, everyone.
Hello, Tori. Where are you calling in from today?
I am calling in just north of Washington, D.C. in the U.S.
Wonderful. Awesome, Tori. Thank you so much for being with us today. And also Tim Rohrbaugh. Tim is former Chief Information Security Officer at JetBlue. Tim, where are you calling in from today?
I am calling in from Massachusetts, Virginia.
Wonderful. All right. Tim, Tori, Abhinav, welcome aboard. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to have a great discussion. I'd like to start our session today by pointing our attention to an article published recently by Investopedia that breaks down the EU AI Act and why it matters globally. It explains laws, risk, and the risk-based approach to regulating AI. It highlights what companies need to do to comply and outlines the implications for US businesses. What's great about this article is that it goes beyond legal jargon and shows how the act will impact everything from tech development to consumer rights. The piece also points out that the EU is setting the tone for AI governance worldwide and that US companies should start preparing now, even before some similar regulations hit us here stateside. Abhinav, I'd like to start with you, if I could. What are your thoughts on the article? What are some things that the article may be missing? Are there some risk areas that we should be considering?
Yeah, thanks. So I think it's a very interesting article, Kevin. I must say that, framing the EU AI Act as a pivotal risk-based regulation with global reach and impact, right? So I, for one, see this act as not just a regulation, but as a catalyst for a more mature, secure, and enterprise-ready AI ecosystem. And the Act, it rightly focuses on the application of AI, not the technology itself. So if you look at the core demands, whether it's for transparency, whether it's for robust data governance, or for human oversight, for the ability to prove your systems are fair and safe, these are not just legal requirements, but they are now the fundamental building blocks of trust in the digital age. So while some may see the AI Act as a regulatory hurdle, we here, and I personally see it as an opportunity. I would say, it is a catalyst for businesses to move away from opaque systems and to embrace the open and sovereign foundations that are necessary to build the future of AI responsibly. So that's what I'll share.
All right, very good. Now, Tori Abhinav mentioned the risk-based aspect. The article outlines how the EU AI Act takes a risk-based approach. From your perspective, why is that significant? What is risk-based, by the way, and why is that significant, and how might it shape companies, how they develop and deploy AI in the future?
Yeah, there are some universal themes with not just the EU AI Act, but also the pending regulations that we're seeing in the US and Canada around evaluating the risk level. And so usually when regulations are talking about risk level, they're really looking at the harm that it could do to people, to society. So typically anything that has to do with military or healthcare is rated at a higher risk level. And it's just how we approach data in our own enterprises, right? If you're looking at personal health information, PHI, that's going to be at a higher risk level than, say, someone's email address. So, or the credit card number is going to be evaluated higher than an office phone number, for instance. So it's applying that sense of which data is most sensitive and needs to be most secure and kept most private to the AI acts and regulations, which I think is really appropriate. We're building on fundamental foundations around data privacy. So I really actually appreciate the EU Act. I think while it can be a little vague, it was the front runner, and I think it is responsible for most enterprises to become really familiar with it and talk to your legal counsel about it, because that can become at least the foundation for what your own AI policies internally might look like.
All right, very good. Now, Tim, the article mentions that U.S. companies, even those not based in the EU, will still be affected. What should American businesses be doing now to prepare, and what challenges might they face in complying?
Well, I have two answers for you that go different directions. One is of course, we have to figure out how to navigate regulations around the world, especially if you work at multinational corporations. But on a side note, the regulations are completely off the mark with respect to the risks. And, I think we might get into some aspects of that, but if you were to first address the fact that their AI is a tool set, and so they didn't even cover with that I can see with respect to the definitions around what we're talking about. If you were to just replace AI with algorithm, that's what's been going on for a long time with respect to even the high risk stuff, the behavior stuff with respect to personalization. So I think we'll be able to get into it later on and then also look specifically at the AI that we're talking about.
All right, very good. Well, the article is from Investopedia. It is here. There is a link here in the chat feature. Everyone, go ahead and take a look at the article. Let us know what you think. Is it resonating with you and what you do at your place of business, or does it overlook some things that we may and should be considering as well? All right, well, very good. Let's move along to our first discussion point. This really leads us to our first discussion point, and that is navigating evolving AI regulations with confidence. Certainly, AI regulations are evolving rapidly, with over 60% of organizations reporting to Gartner that they're challenged to keep up with compliance regulations related to AI. Understanding these challenges and changes is critical to managing risk. Abhinav, I know that you are concerned about AI observability. A lot of teams worry about AI becoming another black box. Can you share an example of how AI observability helps us understand and comply, and given the real-time visibility, whether that's into token costs or bottlenecks? So what can we proactively do to optimize performance and maintain compliance?
Yeah, fair point. So I'm a firm believer of the fact, Kevin, that you cannot fix what you cannot see. So the very first thing that AI observability brings to the table is visibility into your AI infrastructure landscape. That's the very first point. Now, think of it this way, right? In the last 2.5, 3 years, there have been a lot of investments that organizations have put into expensive hardware resources, applications that are utilizing those resources. Over the last 2.5 years, there are multi-billion dollars of investments that have gone into this. Now is the time when organizations are starting to question the return on those investments. So, point number one, what we invested, how is it paying ROI? To do that, what organizations need to ensure is that they're effectively utilizing their compute environments, whether it's the hardware resources, that their applications that they are leveraging, they're performing at their peak. So application performance is maximized. And the first step to do that again is visibility, is understanding usage. And that's where things like, okay, what's your GPU utilization look like? What is your token usage from an LLM's perspective? Which kind of applications are utilizing what kind of GPU hardware and to which degree. So getting a topology of that landscape visualized for an operator who's going to work with it, summarize that information for executives who are going to then decide on it. I think it becomes the basis for a strong AI strategy, especially as organizations now look to navigate this growing patchwork of global AI regulations. There is the EU AI Act, the article that you published, but there are also rules that are coming, whether it's in Canada or in the US and beyond. So from a CEO's perspective, this becomes I would say, one of the most strategic challenges and my advice here would be, my suggestion is that organizations, they need to stop viewing this as a fragmented compliance burden across these regulations globally, and need to start seeing it as like a singular once in a generation opportunity to build a core competitive advantage, which is trust. Trust of their customers, trust of their partners, and trust of their employees. Can we trust your AI? And the first step to that is visibility into what it is doing. So that's where we sit. And that's where
So
observability
observe,
comes into play.
so observability and trust are critical. When it comes to the actual compliance of regulations, how does SUSE integrate regulatory requirements into your deployments and strategies?
Yeah, so this is a broader question, right? So there are a lot of things for organizations, in my opinion, to consider when it comes to being adhering to these regulatory frameworks. And SUSE is a part of that. So let's start with the first one. The first one is mindset. Organizations, they need a cultural shift. The goal is not to grudgingly check boxes for regulators. It is to build demonstrably trustworthy, secure, and fair AI systems. That's one thing that SUSE brings to the table. Number two, the strategy is around a high watermark strategy. So instead of building different AI systems to comply with different regional laws and different regulations, which is in most cases ineffective and chaotic, you need to adopt the strictest standard as your global baseline. That helps you succeed. And SUSE comes with, in our SUSE AI offering, templatized frameworks to help organizations get there. Number three is about building your strategy on pillars of sovereignty and control. So if, for example, if you cannot explain how your AI works or control where the data goes, you cannot guarantee compliance. So you must be able to inspect, to audit, to understand the logic behind your AI infrastructure and models. And SUSE gives you the ability with SUSE AI Observability or SUSE Security to adhere to that as well. And finally, on this front, from an organization's perspective, they also need to establish clear governance and accountability. So having, let's say, an AI governance board, mapping their AI supply chain, demanding a software bill of materials for AI, and prioritizing vendors who do that, who provide that transparency. And again, from SUSE's perspective, we help organizations get there. So that's how we help organizations in their journey to, let's say, regulatory compliance.
Now, Tori, we're at a crossroads where we're looking to innovate, but we're also compelled and need to be compliant. How can organizations stay ahead of rapidly changing AI regulations to ensure ongoing compliance without stifling innovation?
Well, I was chuckling earlier. I don't think you can really stay ahead of AI regulations. I think what we're seeing is a really fragmented approach, even in individual countries like the US, where California and Colorado already have come out with some AI regulations. And the federal government hasn't yet. So I think you just have to sort of accept that it's going to be fragmented. There's lots of tools out there that can help you keep up on what's happening on the regulatory front. And certainly consulting with your legal counsel is highly advisable. And I would ask your legal counsel if they have an in-house expert in AI regulations in particular. Kind of going back to some of the tenets that Abhinav was mentioning, the fifth that I would probably add there is documentation. So, what's really key when we don't understand where the regulations are going and what we might have to comply with is at least building the documentation that leaves an audit trail that could be audited in case you're ever subpoenaed or anything like that. So, with e-discovery and things like that, you want to know you want documentation on the source of the data, the source of the data that was used to train the models, source of the data that was used to complete AI tasks. Those are all things that you want a trail on. You also want a trail on when key decisions were made with AI. So having a document of a timestamp, what decision was made, what AI system was used, and if possible, where the data sources are. Those are things that I think can help you. And there are systems that help you do that, but I think documentation is really, really key. The other thing that I'd be very interested in making sure is documented is when a human was in the loop. So when did a human look at the AI decision that was made and intervene? Or when was a human looking at the several workflows and tasks that AI agents were completing, and did they evaluate it? Was there, it's almost, in my mind, it's almost like when you go into a public restroom and it has a housekeeping schedule of when was the last time that this bathroom was looked at. It's the same thing. I suppose it's kind of hilarious to make the analogy of public restroom to AI, but sometimes it is. So yeah, I think documentation is really key. Human in the loop is really key. And always transparency is key. So informing internal and external users when AI is at play is really important.
Well, Tori, that type of documentation and monitoring, though, that costs money and takes effort. How do you see organizations documenting or justifying the expense? And is there an ROI there?
There is if you're going to get hit with compliance fines in the future. And also, I think it is part of just responsible AI. I don't think that um, there's a complete easy button with AI. I do think if you're looking at responsible AI, you need to be prepared to implement it appropriately and ethically. And that means applying governance standards, applying policies, doing the documentation, talking to your vendors about what are the capabilities of this AI system? Where is the potential for error in this AI system? So as tempting as it is to, just turn it on and all of a sudden I have this beautiful AI system that's consuming, terabytes of data and giving me beautiful charts. That's awesome. But you need to be able to back it up from an enterprise standpoint to mitigate potential risk and to also just do the right thing by your customers.
Now, Tim, you are a former Chief Information Security Officer at JetBlue, an expert in data security. Now, what practical steps should security leaders take to build adaptable compliance frameworks that keep pace with evolving AI laws?
Well, set aside the compliance part because we, as security professionals and privacy professionals, first and foremost, are trying to design the actual program itself. So, from a security perspective, there's something that most folks need to understand, and that is that we have kind of conflicting view with respect to AI. Let's talk about just one tool set under there, which is most of what people think in their mind, Gen AI. Gen AI is the greatest privacy tool since the beginning of the internet. It's also causing the greatest leak of information that enterprises and individuals have had. How can both of those things be true at the same time? It's because you have to add a little bit in there. Which models are you using? So if you were to look at the data flow from enterprises and even from an individual prior to 3 years ago, you wouldn't see a leak of information going to OpenAI, Anthropic, Google specifically for this. Obviously, they had the ad networks. And then Microsoft, Word wasn't sending data out. It was doing spell checking on the computer. Once people enabled Copilot, it's like data exfiltration button. So what they need to understand is that when you're using those proprietary models, data's flowing out because you're not hosting it. If you host the open weights models internally, then you have the ability to actually use the benefits of Gen AI, which is a transformative technology, and yet not send your data out. So if you really think about the ecosystem that's out there today, Hugging Face, which French company, which does like the repository for open weights models. So just on the text transformers, I think they're at like 1.7 million that you can download. They're doing more for privacy and security than most people realize. So it's really about provide as a security practitioner inside of these companies. If you're not using Gen AI, your company is falling behind. So you have to work with your IT team to actually support using local models. Contracts with those 4 companies, that's not a security control, right? Because misuse, can happen obviously outside of their intentions, even if their intention wasn't to misuse the data. So you've got to come up with a strategy to actually build and use open weight models and give it to your employees and your staff.
I was struck by your statement, Gen AI is the greatest privacy tool on the internet.
Since the
Tell
beginning
me
of the
more. What do you
internet.
mean by that?
Because before 3 years ago, every individual has been one of the greatest leakers of their own personal data. They go to Google and they type in. And so eventually the ad networks and all of search knows everything about you, including when you have a stomach ache or when your parents may be exhibiting, signs of dementia, right? But if you use and host a local Gen AI model, you can literally download these models, put them on your computer. They're not as large as the ones that are out there, but you can have it on your computer. You can ask your own computer these same questions. What's happening? It's not going out. So if you use the models locally, then that is where it becomes the greatest privacy tool since the beginning of the internet.
This is AI Talk. We are here today with Abhinav Puri from SUSE. We're talking with Tori Miller-Liu from the Association for Intelligent Information Management and Tim Brorbaugh, former Chief Information Security Officer at JetBlue. If you have a question or a comment for our panel today, please just pop it into the chat feature. We'd be happy to hear your comments, and we will have some time for questions for our panel as well. All right, now, folks, let's move on to our next discussion point, and that is identifying and mitigating unseen shadow AI risks. Studies show that nearly 35% of AI projects involve shadow AI, that is unauthorized or unmonitored AI systems, posing significant security and compliance threats. Now, recognizing and addressing these hidden risks is essential to protect sensitive data and maintain trust. Abhinav, how can AI platforms be leveraged to improve visibility and control over hidden AI activities within our enterprise?
Yeah, good point. So here's the one thing, right? Just like with shadow IT, I do believe that blocking all unauthorized access to AI is quite often impractical and can also stifle, the very innovation that any company would need to stay competitive. So the question here is then, how do you manage shadow AI in a balanced approach that's focused on governance, that's focused on education, that's focused on employee enablement, and to your point, the right technology platforms to be able to get there? And the way I see it is that it's a multi-phase approach that organizations should be considering. First step is effectively about discovering and assessing, what you have in your environment. Because going back to the original comment that I made, that you really cannot fix what you cannot see. So first step is to get a clear picture of what that shadow IT landscape or a shadow AI landscape could look like in your organization. Number one. Number two is then once you have that visibility, you must start establishing clear guidelines. You need to create what could be an AI acceptable use policy, with a list of tools that are acceptable and approved and those that are prohibited. So you get a list of vetted, secure AI platforms that your central IT team is going to support. Once you have that in place, once you have provided those sanctioned environments or sanctioned tools that are as good or probably even better than those shadow AI alternatives, and one angle that you should also consider, and I like what Tim said, going in the same direction, is building a private AI environment because this helps you to build on Tim's point, is to maximize your security and control over your proprietary data. Creating an internal AI platform where you can host your models, where you can host your own AI infrastructure, whether you do it in a private environment or a public cloud environment, as long as you have complete control over that. So this guarantees that your data never leaves your control and that you have an internal platform to leverage AI, Gen AI, or other forms of AI applications on. That is the approach. And finally, once you have that in place, then you start your monitoring and enforcing of policies, ensuring that you have the technical controls in place to enforce the rules. So that to me is a phased approach on how you can leverage, whether it's platforms or process, so to speak, to curtail and reduce shadow AI deployments in organizations.
Now, Tori Abhinav makes a great point. You can't fix what you can't see. So what are some key indicators that shadow AI risks exist within my organization and my information environment? And what should I do to respond?
I mean, there's definitely data loss prevention tools that you can use that actually identify when truly sensitive data, like social security numbers, for instance, are exposed. And there's tools like Microsoft Purview and Cyberhaven that do a really great job of that. But I wanted to just chime in on the human aspect. I think it's really important when you're addressing either shadow IT or shadow AI that you take a very human approach, because ultimately, I don't think people, especially in your organization, are using AI maliciously. What they're doing is they've identified a business problem that they need to solve and they have found a solution. And I want problem solvers to work in my organization. So
Right.
if anything, I almost want to, I think it's really important to have AI policies, but I do think it's also important to enable safe AI experimentation. So teaching people about data privacy or providing data sets, even if they're, synthetic data sets or pseudo-anonymized that staff can actually use to experiment with AI is great, because then you have a whole bunch of shoppers looking for good AI systems that might help your enterprise. So if you can enable that safe experimentation, teach them how to safely use AI tools and assess the value of those tools, they can feed that back to your chief information officer or your IT team to make a determination on whether or not that particular tool is scalable in an enterprise level. So I I think there's a balance between enabling the innovation and also enforcing your policies.
Now, Tim, from a security perspective, what are some of the biggest blind spots caused by shadow AI?
I'm going to define shadow AI differently than shadow IT, in that we have. I kind of joke, but I'm gonna throw this out there. I think we're in the midst of what I've been terming the Great Leak. It's been going on for about 2.5 years. So there's two aspects to that. Individuals are trying to be more productive. They're trying to use this technology. And what are they doing? They're basically giving their data away. They're giving it to individuals. Now, is that data going to be used for training data? That's not the point. The point is that they're putting it in log files on the other side. We just recently had a ruling from Southern District Court, which the judge said that OpenAI can't remove their logs. People are starting to get a sense that, wait a second, does that mean my data's there? It is. So what is the shadow AI that's actually the biggest threat? The biggest one is not necessarily that. That is something that we have to address with education. We can also address with controls at work, but people can use their home computers if they're remote. The real issue is that we have contracts in place with the supply system or supply network. And those contracts that have existed, sometimes thousands of them per company, they didn't take into account what was happening today. And so all of a sudden, now all of your vendors are adding AI enablement. Where is the limitations on them using proprietary models and giving your data to a third party or a fourth party in this case that you didn't realize? So we have got to put our hands around the use of AI, where our data is going, and in probably the biggest case that's happening today with respect to risk. Before 3 years ago, the last thing any of us would have done would have given our code bases away to individuals. And all of a sudden, we're doing code assist with Gen AI models. They're using these IDEs, and if they're connecting to the proprietary models to do it, your code base is going away. If we gave them the option to use local models, it wouldn't be, and they'd have the same benefit. So it's the subtleties in this that we have to be sophisticated enough to address as owners of companies, as suppliers, as companies in critical infrastructure.
All right, very good. We do have a comment or a question coming in from our attendees today, and it is this. As more companies start using AI tools, especially third-party ones, how can we make sure sensitive data isn't accidentally used for training or exposed to vendors? Are there practical ways or frameworks that you'd recommend for keeping data boundaries clear and enforceable? Anyone in the group, anybody have some feedback for this question from our audience?
Yeah, I mean, I sort of said it, but I'm going to tell you that we have to spend as much time in educating our staff as we do our vendors. And so we have got to go back and have frank discussions with all of our supply chain and say, listen, I love that you're adding these features in. Where is our data going? Which models are you using? Are you passing it to another company? Because we have to have the option to actually say that that's okay or it's not okay.
All right, very good. We are here. This is AI Talk. We're talking about keeping private data private, smart and safe AI deployment. All right, folks, let's move on to our third discussion point today, and that is about open source AI strategy that integrates seamlessly, adapts effortlessly, and involves with our business. Open source AI adoption is surging, with over 70% of enterprises now leveraging open source tools to accelerate innovation and reduce costs. That's according to Forrester. So a well-executed open source strategy can help us remain flexible and scalable. Abhinav, what's your take on open source and open source approach, and how does it help ameliorate some of the difficulties that we've been talking about today?
Yeah, happy to. Now, since I come from the world of open source and all transparency, I would like to emphasize that the way we need to look at it is four perspectives. What open source brings to the table, especially in the context of AI. Number one, transparency. The code that we're talking about, that's publicly available, which means it's auditable, which implies that it allows our internal teams, irrespective of which organization you're working for, and the broader community to be able to scrutinize it, to identify vulnerabilities, to proactively address any concerns that or biases that they may exist in the code. So that transparency is effectively fostering, going back to our earlier discussion, trust in our AI systems. So that's point number one. Quicker identification and remediation of security flaws coming from a transparency perspective. Point number two is what open source brings to the table is control. And what that means is because you have access to the code, irrespective of which language model or application it may be, it is completely customizable. You have an ability to do independent audits. It provides you an ability to have stronger compliance. You can deploy it, again, going back to Tim's point, in your secure, private, controlled environments. So that's the second angle. The third angle, Kevin, is innovation. So open source AI effectively thrives on collaboration. Now, think about it this way. When any code or any language models, they are openly available, you have a whole global community of developers, of researchers who are contributing very actively to the improvement of that code, to identifying bugs, to building upon the foundations of that what exists. So there's a lot of collective community intelligence that is contributing to rapid advancements. So driving your innovation, your cycles of innovation are accelerated. That's the third angle. And the final angle, and to me, that's one of the most important angles, is about choice. For any organization, you do not want to be locked into a single vendor's ecosystem. Talk to a CIO, talk to an executive who making an investment. It is giving them the flexibility to choose the best tools, to integrate them with their existing infrastructure, and have still the ability to scale and future proof their investment, which ultimately helps them to optimize their costs going forward. So the choice angle is very key as well. And to me, these are the key value adds or benefits that an open source approach to AI brings to an organization, irrespective of its size, irrespective of which domain it is operating in.
All right, very good. And Tori is mentioning here in the chat, we might take a look at Singapore's AI Verify Foundations governance framework. Thank you so much, Tori, for that. Everyone, take a look at that. Let us know what you think. Now, Tim, open source offers some opportunities, but it also offers a whole other set of factors that we should consider. What are some security best practices that companies should follow when adopting an open source approach to AI to remain compliant and resilient at the same time?
Well, okay, so want to clarify one thing. When we talk about open source being programs, the applications, that everything that you find on GitHub, you can look at all of the code and you can do exactly what Abhinav said. The thing is that with Gen AI, it's open weights models, but we don't really know and we can't look inside of the data, what was trained with. So we have to find other ways to judge it. Does that mean that we should distrust it? No, but we have to make sure that it's operating effectively. So in other words, what's one way to know whether an open weights models that we download is operating effectively? It should hallucinate. That seems counterintuitive. People are talking about hallucination as a bad thing. It's actually a positive. So with respect to inference is what it's doing, it should not have the exact same answer for a complex problem every time. If it does, then it's been overtrained. So how do you deal with something that is imprecise and you don't know exactly what's inside of it? Well, you use it because it's a great privacy tool and it's a great security tool, but you isolate it. So you bring it into your systems and then you use it in your own environment, and you do not use, your end goal is not automation. It's human in the loop. This is about synthetic reasoning. It's not about automation. Automation is ML, algorithms. Gen AI is an imprecise technology. And so you need to bring it in, keep humans in the loop, have it help your staff, put it in there and treat it just like you do an extension of this team and organizational methodology. I'd say the one final point that I want to drive home, and I thought it was brought up, is I'm going to go slightly pivot a little bit on innovation. One of the greatest opportunities with respect to using open weights models, open source in your environment is that you have the ability to use it commercially, but you also have the ability to capture when it does something well that your customers like, that benefits your employees. When you do that, then you create training material, which you can use for what they call, human feedback reinforcement learning. You can use that to modify that model and make it better in the context of your business. That's where you as a business leader will create intellectual property in the future.
I am here today with Tim Rohrbaugh, Tori Miller-Liu, and Abhinav Puri. We've been talking about keeping your data private. And look, I don't know where our time has gone today, folks, but we have reached the action item round of the program. I'm wondering if each of you could provide us with one quick action item that our viewers can use to take advantage of your ideas and advice today. Tim, do you have an action item for us?
Yeah, the simplest one. This isn't a production ready answer, but go use something that's kind of pre-done for you where a lot of the hard work. So something like Olama, which is actually a wrapper around the library that brings these models up locally, called Llama CPP, and something like Open Web UI, both open source. You can go look at them. You can bring them on your computer, and it will allow you to actually run and experience Gen AI in an environment that feels very much like you're using, OpenAI or one of the other ones without the risk of sending your data out.
That is Tim Rohrbaugh from formerly with JetBlue. Tim, thank you so much for being with us today. Tori, do you have an action item for us?
Yeah, I think not to like continue to echo myself, but focus on the data. So if you have AI systems already in use, and most of our enterprises do already, take one of those AI systems and look at the data and the data source. What data was used to train the model? Does it contain PII or PHI? And just be curious about it. You're not going to reach 100% data quality. You're not going to reach 100% secure private environments. But if you start asking those questions of your vendors, like Tim mentioned earlier, and of your staff, you will create a healthier environment for your data and a more responsible AI approach.
That is Tori Miller-Liu, President and CEO of AIM, the Association for Intelligent Information Management. Tori, thank you so much for being with us today. And Abhinav, do you have an action item for us?
Absolutely. And I think, again, I'll combine what Tori and Tim were referring to. I suggest for any organization who wants to just quickly go and drive something, the very first step you need to do is understand what use case you want to leverage this for. What do you want to do with it? And for the most sensitive use cases where you want to keep your data under your control, truly consider deploying this on your own private AI infrastructure. Tim shared a couple of very concrete examples on tools on how you can do that on your own local machines. And this is how you can scale it, irrespective of which organization you're working in, from your own infrastructure to an organization enterprise-wide. So start small, identify the use case. If it's a data and privacy sensitive use case, run it in a private environment and see how it goes.
That is Abhinav Puri, Vice President and General Manager, Portfolio Solutions and Services at SUSE. Abhinav, Tori, Tim, it has been great speaking with you today. Thank you so much. What a great panel. Your perspectives and advice are spot on. So thank you so much. I hope that we'll get a chance to talk again soon. And to everyone joining us today, thank you too. Look, join us again next time on June 24th with another great panel of guests. We'll be discussing the topic of leading your human-centered AI and automation evolution. That should be another great discussion. In the meantime, if you'd like to find me, you can do so on LinkedIn. I'm happy to connect there, so check me out. I'm Kevin Crane, and you can check out my weekly audio podcast, the Digital Transformation Podcast. But for now, this will do it for this episode of AI Talk, and until next time, I am Kevin Crane saying thanks for watching.